In order to understand how displacement mapping works, I've created this very simple scene here. We've got just two objects in it, a ground plane, which will act as a kind of a shadow catcher for me as we displace this secondary plane here that has some subdivisions in it and is also being displayed as a Catmull-Clark smooth object. So the first thing we want to do is learn about image maps and how they can be used as displacements on your object. So what I'll do here is I've got a series of images that I've loaded into my clip browser here, and I'm just going to go over to the shader tree here, and you see I have two materials, one for the plane and one for the ground. We don't really need to concern ourselves too much with the ground itself, but the plane here is what we want to displace. So I'm going to grab a one of these images here, and let's do this one first, this linear gradient, and we'll apply that there. Now by default, Modo applies this as a diffuse color. You can see it over here, and it's a simple gradient ramp from black to white. And now I'm going to change the effect from diffuse color to displacement, and that's all the way down here where it says surface shading. Go over to displacement right there, click on that, and you can immediately see what's happened. It has actually displaced the geometry of this plane from 0, where it was black, to whatever height we set for the displacement map in the material setting. So this height here is controlled by this setting here, displacement distance, and I can actually in real time just kind of dial that up or down wherever I want. Now you'll notice that it only goes vertically. It goes directly straight up. It doesn't warp. Now you will see some arching here because this is not a perfectly linear ramp, but for the most part you can actually see how it's displacing. Now we can also view this, I think, in advanced viewport here, and you'll see it is much smoother than it is in default mode, which actually is showing up, it's actually showing some of the pixelization of the image itself, the limitation of the image. And you can see this image is only 512 by what? Let's see, 512 by 512 right there. So it's a relatively low resolution image. So let me go ahead and trade this image out, clicking on the image container here, and let's go to a 4K map. Okay, now you can see that there's a lot less jaggies on the image. Now for the most part, Modo will not render that. Modo will smooth that out in the rendering, but be aware that this process is very resolution dependent. By that I mean it is both in resolution dependent of the, let's see if I can click on this. There we go. Resolution dependent of the plane itself, of the geometry, and also resolution dependent of the image that you're using to display. So both of those should be relatively high resolution. Now we can go over and change some settings on the geometry to make it a higher resolution, and I'll show you those settings in just a minute. But for the most part, we have a linear gradient that's mapped onto this image's UV map, which is just a simple square. So it takes up the whole space. Now let's go ahead and change this out to even a higher resolution, which is an OpenEXR at 32-bit. Here, this is a 24-bit image, as you can see, and this is a 32-bit image. So I'm going to swap that out. Go to my images here, swap that out to the 32-bit, and you'll see it's even smoother still. So again, resolution matters a lot. So let's go ahead and try some other images here to kind of drive home the point. Let's do this one here, this stepped grad. You can see it goes from black to white. I'm going to click on that image container there. I'm going to click on that and just click on that to change out the image. And as you can see right there, it did do exactly what it was intended to do. And let's change this back to diffuse color so you can see what's going on. So from black, you will have no displacement, and the various gray levels in between, you will have various degrees of displacement. Okay, so let's go ahead and change that and just go to my recent here, displacement, and now you can see that. All right, now displacement also works with other types of images as well. Do be aware though that displacement mapping utilizes the luminance value only of an image and not the color values to displace the geometry. Let's go ahead and change out a few. Let's do this one. Now you can see that it does displace it, but again, it is very resolution dependent. Now this is a very low quality image, but again, you can see the jaggies in the displacement here based on the low resolution of this image, which is only 300 by 300. But also you can see geometry displacement here is also jagged. And we will address that particular issue in the next video.